Good afternoon, everyone. In today's segment of Asia Yesterday,
we will be discussing patterns of European rule
as well as Westernization and education during that era.
Southeast Asia is a region of massive potential during the age of European rule, since it contains a lot of the most prominent trade networks during that time, as well as housing a natural abundance of production of tin, oil, rubber, sugar, rice, tobacco, coffee, tea, and other commodities essential to trade and income. Driven by both government and private activities, this brought rapid changes to the physical and human landscape and coupled Southeast Asia to a new worldwide capitalist system. The patterns of European colonial rule can be divided into two distinct forms.
They either drive the indigenous population away from potential settlement, sometimes even going as far as committing genocide. Another form is, instead of forcing dominance by the way of aggression, they opted for a less destructive way, and established government and administrations that superimpose the pre-colonial system, sometimes effectively replacing it. This was the weight of control the West subjected Southeast Asia to, a deceitful pivoting against the pre-made authority of the indigenous people, eventually becoming the dominating authority themselves, and reducing the power of the past rulers to only ceremonious or sometimes non-existent roles. Examples of this pattern of rule are the British control over the Malay, in which they created a political and economical system that coexisted with, but also deviated from, the traditional Malay administration and society. The French in Indochina, who established a protectorate system in which their resident system disguised their direct authority as guidance, describing it as a partnered administration, and the hybrid administration of the Dutch in the East Indies, where they directly ruled but because of the established system of government, which led to the removal of local systems and the merging of the local authority to the new Dutch administration.
To conclude, Europeans put down strong bureaucratic roots and formed centralized, disciplined structures of great power, although they have also co-opted existing administrative apparatuses. And after the indigenous societies have been systematically disarmed and robbed of power, the Europeans possess a somewhat monopoly on the means of authority and control over these societies.
The effectiveness of Westernization to Southeast Asia region can be accounted for its captivating technological advancement, that even though Siam avoided the Western rule, it was nevertheless compelled to adopt policies similar to, and often even modeled to, those of the colonial powers in order to survive. Modernization appeared to require such an approach and the side did not hesitate to embrace it with enthusiasm. However, possession of empire could not be justified by economic and strategic factors alone, but it must serve a moral agenda, namely the provision of access to Western ideas, education, and culture, along with the increased provision for the welfare and development of indigenous societies.
Possession of empire could not be justified by economic and strategic factors alone, but that it must serve a moral agenda, namely the provision of access to Western ideas, education, and culture, along with increased provision for the welfare of development of indigenous societies. This new generation of native elite, with the newly acquired Western ideas, confronted the colonial power through self-strengthening. In their search for an effective focus of resistance to European power, the elites were themselves Westernized. This was the generation that spearheaded the struggles for independence. Upon learning the importance of modern education, they started sending students abroad. In the case of Vietnam, students were sent to China and Japan to accumulate knowledge necessary to eventually overthrow foreign rule. Whereas in Indonesia, the Dutch provided modern education to enable to serve in the civil service or in private economic organizations. The country's cultural and social revolution can also be attributed to the advanced educational system. Indonesians learned the concepts of freedom and justice, which led to movements of national awakening. These movements served as a decisive factor in the struggle for Indonesian independence and for the elimination of Dutch colonialism.
To sum up, the intensity of colonialism has affected the intensity of the response to colonialism and its cultural features. Quality education, which was mostly provided by the West, played a crucial role in the transformation toward the reawakened society to keep up with the rest of the world as it approaches modernization.
And now we will go to Mr. Lim to discuss and explain the topic of nationalism in this era.
Nationalism. What is nationalism? Nationalism is a desire for a large group of people, such as people who share the same culture, history, language, and belief to form a separate and independent nation of their own. Just like the era of Western colonization starting in parts of Southeast Asia, every country colonized planned different strategies to retain and preserve their culture and to redeem their independence.
An example of this act is when the French colonizers entered Vietnam and Vietnam produced propaganda newspapers in their own language to make sure the French wouldn't understand, and they were sending students to Japan and China because these are two countries in Asia that were able to maintain their culture and update their Confucian state.
And in Indonesia, Sama has a similar strategy against the colonizers. But because of the Dutch and British settlers in Indonesia, they managed to learn the Indonesian language, which is Bahasa Indonesia. That is why the Indonesian people used the Malayan language so the colonizers wouldn't be able to understand it.
We thank you, Mr. Lim, for that wonderful outro in nationalism. And now we proceed to revolution and constitutional change. Anti-colonialism movements are theaters of nationalism and discourses of nationality. Revolution and constitutional change isn't really about literal constitutional change. Rather, what is talked about by the reading is the main ideology or principle which was followed during that era and how they were able to come up with the transition from feudalism to communism. With national self-consciousness awakened, anti-colonialism is born as the colonized people become enlightened of their political and economic exploitation by a party regarded as exterior to their collective community.
The age-old oppression of colonial and weak nationalities by the imperialist powers has not only failed the working masses of the oppressing nations, but also it provided the grassroots of communism as a champion of the struggle of the proletariat for the overthrow of the bourgeoisie. Communist International, or Comintern, was set up in the Soviet Union with the objective of orchestrating communist and anti-colonial activity throughout the world. In the course of 1920s, a Comintern network was spread throughout the East and Southeast Asia, such as the French Indochina, Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia. The main aim of the Comintern, therefore, was to develop in the colonial world a small revolutionary nucleus composed of intellectuals, members of the embryonic working class in big cities like Singapore, and the poorer peasantry. One prominent face of communism in Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh, said he joined the French Socialist Party because they have shown their sympathy over him towards the struggle of the oppressed peoples, meaning even he, as a middle class who went to Europe, feels deeply a connection with his fellow men, unable to fathom why the alien Europeans, particularly France, have interfered with their country in different areas. Based on the goal of Comintern, they were able to produce a national face of liberalism from the Europeans through Ho Chi Minh. This alone could ensure that the forces of global revolution and the forces of anti-colonialism would unite behind a common purpose, to fight the oppressors and to be an independent country. With national self-consciousness awakened, anti-colonialism is born as the colonized people became enlightened of their political and economic exploitation by a party regarded as exterior to their collective community.
It was the communist leadership more than any other that was able to educate the rural hinterland in the profound sense of changing their worldview and detaching them from the grip of the ancient regime. And at the same time, mobilize them into an effective anti-colonial force. It is paradoxical, but not at the end surprising, that the primary ideology of resistance to colonial rule, which is nationalism, was fundamentally shaped by European ideas and experiences.
In Southeast Asia, nationalism was also expressed either through rebellion or cooperation with the colonial authorities towards their struggle for independence. All this being said, the present can learn a great deal from these two events in history. We should valiantly fight for our nation when we are called, and be free from outside control.
Upon the aftermath of the Philippine-American War, the United States was able to exercise control through ilustrados and appointed American administrators. The goal of the United States was to enforce their policy, introducing education to the indigenous Filipinos, guiding them towards self-governance, eventually democratize the Philippines. Things seemed to be looking up as Francis Harrison ruled as Governor General. He supported the Filipinos' desire for independence by establishing the Philippine Commission, creating a bicameral all-Filipino legislature, at the same time implementing the Jones Act, which promises independence once the Philippines is ready. However, Republicans feared the Philippines' fast-paced progress towards self-governance, as they needed to retain the country's state of being a showcase of democracy. The Philippines will continue to live under America's thumb until after World War II, where United States finally granted Philippines full independence. Meanwhile, in Burma, Burmans resist against British rule. The Sayasan Rebellion has been dubbed as the last gasp of traditional Burma. Led by Sayasan, this rebellion was short-lived but made a lasting impact on the Burmese society and weakened the hold of British authority in Burma. The rebellion began with the outbreak on December 22 and was eventually defeated by the British military with their advanced weapons. Sayasan fled thereafter but was found a few months later and was immediately brought to Sarawadi to be tried. Unfortunately, he was sentenced to death by hanging in 1931. British reports point out that the cause of rebellion was their restless and excitable nature and their ignorance and belief in superstitions. From this conclusion, we can see that Britain's repugnant attitude towards Burmese culture, which they labeled as superstitions. This rebellion is being interpreted two different ways. For the Burmese, Sayasan was a nationalistic hero, whereas on the perspective of the British, the rebellion was instigated by economical dissatisfaction.
At the same time, we should learn to embrace and love our culture, for it is what defines us as a nation.
Reporting from Cambodia for Outlets News 5.
I am Miguel Lim, and this has been Nationalism.
I am Samantha Lipada, and this has been Revolution.
I am Job Manaan, and this has been Constitutional Change.
And we are signing off.
Thank you.
Reporting from Myanmar,
This has been Asia Yesterday. I am Jose Oscar Magpusao, and this has been The Patterns of European Rule.
and I'm Beatrice M. Laporga, and this has been Westernization and Education in Southeast Asia.
We hope you enjoyed our segment here for today. Thank you and good night.